Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about virtual production and media production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little more time on. Today, we're going to talk about WWDC. I know we just talked about NAMM and Cinegear, and you thought, well, that's busy. We're going to do a little bit more. So we're going to be covering WWDC this year, and we'll talk a little bit about what our plans are and get your input and questions and suggestions. So stay tuned for that in the second hour. Again, if you want to find out more about what we do, go to officehours.global. All right, let's jump into the questions. Go ahead, Bill. What's our first question?
Our first one's in from Daniel Goldstein in Washington, D.C., and Daniel says, does anyone have experience with Waves audio plugin licensing on AWS instances? Their new Cloud MX seems very expensive, plus limited to their plugins only, analogous to Restream IO versus AWS Media Services.
I am afraid you may have stumped us. I don't know if any of us are using Waves in the cloud yet. It does seem like it'll be interesting to see how they do. You know, to have something that is expensive and exclusive all at the same time without a lot of jumpstart, that can be a very difficult thing to climb, a difficult hill to climb. So we'll see how they do. But check back in a couple months and we'll see if anyone's tested it. Maybe we'll see if we can get them on. Well, I think we're talking about having Waves on the show. So that'll be a good question for when they get there. All right, next question.
David Paskin in Miami and here on the panel says, why does Isadora not allow displays to have separate spaces?
Can you explain the issue, David?
Sure. So I have, just by default, I think, separate spaces set up on my displays. I have multiple displays so that, for example, when I open Keynote and I want to go not full screen, but play in window, I can still move things around to my other displays. When you open Isadora, one of the prompts that it gives you is, please disable separate spaces. And then you have to do that. You have to log out, you have to log back in and then reopen it.
Are you able to disable spaces on the Mac?
Not disable. It's not disabling spaces. It's disabling separate spaces. I can, I'll show you here.
Because I would love to disable spaces on the Mac. So
really?
like if that was an option, I would turn it off in a heartbeat.
So I just have to remember where it is. I believe it's under, is it dock and menu bar? I never remember where this is. Here it is. Yeah. So down at the bottom here, you've got menu bar. No, that's not it. Forgive me.
Yeah, I believe it's in general.
No, it's definitely not in general. Only because I've had to search for this for a few times. I can't find it right now. I apologize.
And what are you disabling when you go in there?
You're disabling
automatically rearrange
separate spaces. Here, displays have separate spaces.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't make this bigger. So if I want to use Isadora, I have to uncheck that and then log out, log back in.
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer of why that is, but I'm really glad you brought that up. I mean, it's been one of those things. I personally would disable spaces all the time. It drives me absolutely crazy. You drag something up and suddenly it's created a new space. I was like, I didn't ask for that. Like I didn't ask you to do that. So the automatic nature of spaces drives me crazy. I have a feeling it has to do with the fact that because it's using those other HDMI outputs for potentially screens for it would be difficult for it to work if it didn't have, it needs to know that other monitor is an output screen for it. And if it was and I don't know enough about Isadora to know, but I'm guessing that it's using that. And if you set up a spaces, it can't own it. And then it would have trouble, it could probably create a lot of instability on their end. That's my uninformed guess. Next question.
Comes to us from Jacob Goodnight in Indianapolis, and he says, Mitchell Hill, have you thought of using the Neumann U87 behind you for office hours use? It would be overkill, but awesome to hear.
I guess we'll jump to Mitchell first. I know I set up for Victor there, but Victor, Mitchell, have you thought about it?
I thought about it, and Jacob, thanks for asking the question. There's a quick story that goes behind that mic. It was one of the first things I bought in 1979. It's been rebuilt once, but it is much of my voice and my sound of my voice as anything is that's in my vocal chain. Unfortunately, it's on a completely different system over here behind me. It's more of a broadcast digital system. It's not on Dante. If it was, I could switch it in and out. But I'm kind of stuck with my little AKG 414 here. And the other thing is,
he's slumming it with a 414. You know how it is.
I'm not slumming. It's just that it happens to be a spare mic, and it's not too far off on the sound that it makes that the U87. The problem with my voice is I've got a lot of presence in it, and some mics will splash those high frequencies and make me sound harsh. The U87 just says, "Okay, give me more," and it's sweet.
Go ahead, Victor.
I wasn't going to comment on Mitchell's microphone, but just in general, I think if you go for a microphone like that, you better have a good controlled environment. Last I remember, although it's been a while since I've been in office hours, there is no overkill when it comes to equipment here. So don't worry about that part of it. And then lastly, if you want to try a 6747 experience, but don't want to spend the money, there's like good modeling microphones. Like right now, the Slate Digital ML1 large diaphragm microphone is on sale, like $300 off or $500. And that microphone will model Neumann's, AKG's, Sony's. So it's a good way to go if you want to get close, but not pay the kind of money you would pay for an 87.
And welcome back, Victor. It's good to have you.
It's good to be back.
Oh, awesome. Go ahead, Bill.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about microphones for human voice, since I've been doing voiceover for such a long time. And I'm going to tell you a couple of little anecdotes. One quickly about lavs. I own two different kinds of Sony wired lavs, the ECM77B and the ECM44. Now, the difference between those two, and this is how it relates to getting a really, really good microphone. The 77 is very transparent. I think it became very popular because it intercut with high-end booms like the Sheps and things like that they use in recording studios, but it's very transparent, very open sounding. If you use that on a set and the set is noisy, it brings in so much of that extra noise that it's actually a poor mic for that use. And I actually would pull the 44, which is much less transparent, much less sensitive, because it would isolate the voice more from the background. And in these high-end mics like that, when you get up into the U87s, when you get up into the Sony 800s, which are insanely expensive, and these things that are boutique mics, if you don't have an absolutely perfect environment and are able to control performance and everything else that goes on around it, they will show every possible flaw. So don't think that just because a mic costs more, that's the way you have to go to get better.
Yeah, it's not the cost of the mic; it's the cost of the whole room. It's, that the mic requires. I use this. This is a 103, the TLM 103, and when I moved to it, I had to change a lot of things in my room to just make it work. And I can't use it without noise assist because you'd hear a bunch of little fans because it picks up everything. But I will say that we got the MV7. I was testing the MV7 and I used it and I got a lot of feedback of like, what happened to your voice? And I'm like, it was the mic, so the MV7 is a great mic. We're really happy with it for the cost, but it's not the same mic. And so these mics are great. And when you spend more, not all of them, but when you spend some of them more, you definitely get some quality out of them, but it's a thing. Yeah. Go, Mitch, why are you holding up your hand?
For some reason, I can't hit the button on the Mukana.
Right there.
To your point, what you just said is that's an expensive mic. I didn't buy it because it was just the dream microphone. But here's the problem. Now you've got to, if you get a microphone like that, you need to have a processor that's equally good. And I've got like a Neve 8801, which is very expensive, about $4,000 just because of that mic. So yeah, it's a rabbit hole you can go into. You got to have that mic. You got to have this to go with it.
Yeah, or you won't get any real advantage out of it. Next question.
Next question from David Paskin in Miami, Florida says, I continue to have troubles with universal control. I have 3 Macs and 1 iPad. I want to connect 2 of the Macs and not the others. One of the Macs I want just won't stay connected, and the other 2 devices, I don't want them to keep connecting.
So is there a way to, and I will admit that I started down the path of universal control and it was a little wonky and I just stopped. And I was like, okay, well, this needs another version. I was just like, it was like doing things that I didn't expect it to. And so I just put it on I have a tendency, because I'm in production, that if something doesn't work out of the gate, unless I need it for production, I just go, I'll wait for another version and see how it goes. But you're trying to get it to work, and are you able to establish, or you should be able to define what screens are where, right?
Yes.
But that's not happening.
So you can. So this is my universal control, or my displays panel right here. And you can see that this is my one computer. I've got the 3 monitors here. If I go into universal control, I've got everything checked, but for whatever reason, it's not seeing the computer that's sitting right next to it. And
they're all updated on Monterey. So
they're all on the latest thing. And so I've done the unspeakable, and I've gone back to using Synergy. I apologize, Alex.
You don't have to apologize to me. I don't have anything against the poor company. I just that it did the more damage to one computer than I've ever seen a Mac. Like I've never seen any Mac get so damaged ever. So I that's all. I'm not anti-Synergy.
I'm just
if
very
you survive
sad.
it, then good job.
I'm just very disappointed because I feel like universal control looked so promising, and it just isn't performing for me.
It's a new feature and it's very aggressive. What they're doing is a lot of times, what they're doing is hard, and I think that's part of that puzzle. And you're using, they're all Wi-Fi on, right? They all have their Wi-Fi on. It's very interesting. Go ahead, Victor.
Can't hear you, Victor.
I had a similar problem the other day when I was doing a Mac Studio, and I rebooted each machine, and then unintuitively to me, I had to swipe the mouse the opposite direction to what I thought would be natural. I thought I would have to go right, but I had to go left, and all of a sudden the cursor appeared on the Mac that it wasn't appearing before. So you might want to try something as simple as that.
Interesting. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I was playing with my new Preset Studio, and I brought display settings up on my Mac, and I saw both sets of screens from both Macs. And then I had to make sure they were in the right sequence as I moved my mouse. But I was actually I wasn't expecting to see display settings show all the screens from both of my Macs.
Right. Yeah, it does seem to work randomly right now. And again, I think that I think in the next version, we'll probably see it tighten up. I mean, this is it's something that no one else has really done very effectively. I mean, Synergy did it pretty well. By the way, the note is that whatever you're doing with Synergy, just turn off the drive services, like the copy drive. That's the thing that got my computer after doing some research. And it's the copy. What happened was a drive got over the edge between 2 monitors, and it tried to copy the whole drive or something, and it just went into a horrible cycle of death. Anyway, Bill.
Yeah, I had the same experience that Victor did in terms of, as soon as I moved to this rig that I have now, where I have 2 separate outboard monitors next to my laptop, one of which, both connected by USB-C. Every morning when I start up, I have no idea whether scrolling the mouse to the right is going to move it to the screen on the right or move it to the outside edge of the screen on the left. And I've been trying all sorts of different, what if I hook them up in a different order? What if I just switch the plugs? It seems to be a certain randomness to seeing and positioning on your screen real estate separate screens.
I think you have to tap the screens together. You just take it, just tap the screen to this one, and it'll go, oh yeah, there we go. All right,
wake up the haptic feedback. Yeah.
Exactly. There's a whole, like in the new monitors, there's a whole like processor in there. I bet you could take 2 of the new monitors and just tap them together, and
or just scream at it, "Stay on the right."
Yeah, exactly. Say, yeah, hey, what,
hey, right monitor, stop moving.
Yeah. All right. Next question.
Chad Lafarge, Columbia, Missouri, says, Alex mentioned a shift to timing the show to reflect timings for satellite. Do we need to build in simulated commercial breaks and other time-critical events and the tools to support them?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, most satellite shows that are on radio come with a clock. Basically, it's a clock that's drawn out with all the breaks and things on it. And you have to do that so that they can program their automation system to take it. The answer is yes. You would have to do some breaks, for example, the top of the hour break, so that if we break it for hour 1 and hour 2, we'd have to pause for station identification so that they could go ahead and do that. And it's probably a good idea to do it to the bottom of the hour 2, but it doesn't have to be disruptive to the program. It's very basic. And they'll always just jump in whenever they need to run their commercial anyhow.
Yeah, we're not going to worry about commercials, but we are going to slowly tighten the top of the hours to be precise. So, and then we'll figure it out. I'm going to talk to a couple folks about what they need to have delivered. Taylor brought up the fact that when we're timing it for YouTube, that it's off for his radio station. So we already have, Taylor is kind enough to be testing what would it be like to use our programming in a radio system. And so he brought up that, it starts early. So we're going to work with Taylor and eventually with others to time it so that it is a more accurate setup there, so that it really starts and stops. We don't know when we're going to be able to do it, but we have ideas about putting it on satellite for a lot of different, around the world, and a lot of this came from some folks that are using this all over the world in a meaningful way, and realizing that people learning this everywhere is important, because it can be disruptive and supportive and all kinds of other things at the same time that help a lot of people. So we want to try to get it out to as many people as possible. So we're going to keep on working first with Taylor, then with other folks in our group that have radio stations, and then, really try to figure out how we make it palatable for radio stations that want to use it anywhere in the world, to be able to turn it on relatively easily. So this is kind of a multi-month, 2-3 month process. Next question.
Eric Nathan in Bellingham, Washington has this question. I just purchased Motion last night. Is there an office hours tutorial available on how to build a countdown timer? Suggest some other resources to learn its secrets.
Go ahead, Nigel.
I know Alex has talked about countdown timers, but to the best of my knowledge, we've actually never done a full tutorial. I know Alex talked through it once, but I couldn't find that. But my advice on Motion in general is ripple training. Yeah. And I'm about to put a link into the chat, which is a 1-hour class that I don't know which of them did, which is free on YouTube around ripple training. Before you do anything else, including understanding countdown timers, I would do that 1-hour class.
You go ahead, Sky.
I was online with Eric last night working on the NAM project, and he said, yeah, I just bought this. And I thought, well, Alex has done demos specifically about countdown timers, and it was really dynamic and interesting and quick. And I said, and I'm sure it was recorded, but this was before we were archiving where those were in the YouTube.
No, I don't think so. I think it should be back there. I mean, there should be a way to search Motion on our website.
We tried, and
you couldn't find it.
He couldn't find it. I didn't. Right. I didn't attempt it. But
this might be this might be my first video on our site on our page. I'll just do a countdown.
And look at all this extra time we have. Maybe
no,
I can't.
I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it now because I'm not set up for it.
Okay.
But the I know better. I know better than to do that. Anyway. So that'll just be a 5-minute train wreck of me. Oh right, I got to do the thing.
Now I said it could be either interesting or entertaining, and that a train wreck.
Yeah. I'd rather not.
Maybe not.
So anyway, but we'll I'll work on putting up a little tutorial because it's really easy. I literally there's a demo somewhere in one of our shows that shows me doing it in about 2 minutes, and you can do 2D clocks, 3D. The 3D clock is literally a button. Like I would like to have 3D letters instead of 2D letters, and I've been campaigning for something a little bit more set up to make this work. But anyway, we'll see how that turns out. All right, next question.
Next one comes from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. Is title and action safe still relevant in today's digital world?
Go ahead, Bill.
The answer, I think, is yes and no. It's less and less the tradition. The tradition was title and action safe were an area on the side of screens to account for the fact that televisions in the broadcast era all had different width bezels, which is the kind of mask around the tube of a television. So if you put text literally from the first pixel of a tube to the last one, and then you put it inside the bezel, it would cut off words and you couldn't see it. So they came up with Title Safe, which it makes sure that everything that you put in a title gets seen, and Action Safe, which gives you a little extra margin on top of that. Now, in today's world of computer-driven, mostly video, there's much more control over that. Televisions do not have those bezels the same way they did now, and you can tell that looking at any computer or iPad or anything else. But the design idea of leaving a margin of space on the outside of things so that your eyes don't have to completely go the entire distance of the screen and keeping things a little more centered, I think is still an excellent design idea, unless you're doing what's called full bleed, which is a thing where you do want to run to the edges for artistic purposes. But if you don't want to do that specifically, keep yourself a margin. It's going to help your viewers kind of keep things centered in space.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
I just learned something new. I thought bezels were bagels that went around your TV, but that's just me. Yeah, it was a technical issue, as Bill says, back in the day when you couldn't count on all frames being or lines being shown in a TV scan. But today, everything is shown because it's digital. But it's switched now to more of a, like you said, an aesthetic decision to keep stuff away from the corners. It just looks bad when you have graphics right up against the edge. And if you use Action or Title Safe, it just helps you do that.
Go ahead, Sky.
Even in printing, they have margins. And so just because you can put your text all the way to the edge of the new screens, I would, unless you're going to do it for art's sake, as Bill mentioned, I would give it yourself a little bit of a buffer because you want that edge to have a bit of a contrast. And Bill, we're going to have to rock, paper, scissors because I was taught it was bezel. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, the thing that we find that we spend more time doing is thinking about what zones are being used for what. So a lot of programs that we work on have ignored Action Safe is 10% in, Title Safe is 20% in, and a lot of them ignore it. But we have to know that, are we putting the bug down here? Are we putting a bug up here? Are there going to be emojis rolling along the bottom? Do we have a ticker going across the bottom? So while it's not necessarily Action Safe or Title Safe, it is a function of understanding all the other graphics that may be keyed over top of your show is something that we pay a lot of attention to, probably more attention to than Action or Title Safe. Next question.
Mitchell Hill, Wilmington, Delaware, has another one. When would I use pre-multiplied with black to create a clean alpha key?
Anytime you're using, you want to do that anytime you're doing a video that you might use in an item. And here's what happened. The reason there's two different types of alpha channels. There's what we call straight alpha channel, and then we have the pre-multiplied. And so what straight does is, of course, you have your RGB, and you'll have it. That's your subject or whatever, and then you have a knockout that is the alpha channel that's going to knock that out. Now, when we're rendering in 3D, for instance, and you do straight alpha, it doesn't try to anti-alias the edges. It just prints whole pixels. So it'll look and if you see something with semi-transparency, it just looks totally opaque. I'm not worried about the transparency with this subject because I know that you have an alpha channel coming, right? So that's how straight works. And the reason that you want to use straight is because if you start layering things, so if you do multipass, so I used to, there was a big shiny ship that I rendered and it was about 22 passes. So it was literally 22 different videos were rendered of that ship to do all the passes. If I had done that in pre-multiplied, what happens is as I start to stack them up, what pre-multiplied does is it takes the alpha channel and it multiplies it. Literally, the math is multiply. It multiplies the matte to the RGB. Then it ships out with the matte. And the reason it does that is because, why multiply works is because black is 0 and white is 1. Right. So when you multiply the 1 against the core of your data, it doesn't do anything because 1 times any value is still the same value that it was before. 0, of course, makes it black. So multiplying the alpha channel to the foreground color is why it knocks it out essentially. But that's why it's called pre-multiply. It's literally doing a multiplication for every pixel. You don't want to think about an image as an image. You want to think of every pixel as a value. Every pixel, like a value it's in RGB, so it might be 255, 118, 53 for that pixel. Like that's all you want to think about when you think about every pixel is its own math, and this is what we call pixel math, as opposed to a convolution kernel. So so what happens is that typically the advantage of pre-multiplying it is that you don't have to do the second operation. So when you have when I have an image like this, and I have my alpha channel, and then I have a background, and what I do here is that if when I don't have it pre-multiplied, I take this alpha channel will be about the same, right? I take this alpha channel and I multiply it to here, and then I take this alpha channel and I invert it and I multiply it to the background, which if I invert it, it'll knock a hole in the background. Then I add these two together, literally add them, like add the pixel values together. So in a straight alpha, that's how that works. If you pre-multiply it, you don't have to. You only have to knock the background out. You only have to knock the foreground out. You knock the blacks out and then add it. So you're skipping an operation because you're not knocking out the second one. And it's just less CPU power to do it. And that is what the ATEM Mini does, or all the ATEMs do, is they don't want to do that second operation. So if you don't pre-multiply to black, it just knocks out the background and knocks the whole out, and then it adds them together because it didn't do the second knockout of the foreground. It's expecting you to pre-multiply it so that when it adds it, all that black is still black, and it just doesn't, when it gets added, it doesn't do anything to the front image. But if you have a straight alpha and you have got all kinds of other stuff there that you cut out, it'll affect your image on the ATEM. So that's, I don't know, as short as I can explain why you want to have a pre-multiply. Anyway, go ahead, Mitchell.
No, it's an excellent answer. A dead giveaway that you need to have pre-multiplied if you're looking at the alpha and it's it hasn't been anti-aliased, because the aliasing data is usually in the alpha channel itself. So
right.
The pre-multiplied takes that out of the equation.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle is up with this one. What experiences have you had with a creative agency and roles they have had in the production process?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, so there are lots of different types of creative agencies, but in general, I think the biggest question you have to ask yourself before you engage with a creative agency is, are you going to be a small client at a big agency or a big client at a small agency? Clearly, the best result is to be a large client at a large agency, but those are really important. If you are a small client at a large agency, you will not get the A team. And the A team is fundamentally different from the B and C team. I mean, shockingly different. And the level of that creative team, the smartness that I've worked with when I've had A teams is fundamentally different from a B team. So sometimes it's better to go to a small agency where you're actually a much more important client, and then you'll get the top creative skills. But the reality is your relationship with the creative leadership is really the most important thing. Whether you can communicate, whether you can talk to each other, where you're on the same page. That's where the real magic happens. Now, some of them will have full production capabilities. Some will outsource them. Some may just have limited services. But I think you have to decide what type of client you want to be of that agency, because it makes a fundamental difference. And then you can go and get the rest of the resources elsewhere.
All right, go ahead, Dave. Bill?
So also, I 100% thumbs up to everything that Nigel just said. There's also another element to it, which is that people think creativity is starting with nothing and just making stuff up with good ideas. That is a piece of it, creating ideas out of whole cloth. But ideas do not have much value unless they can be implemented too. So another role that I've often found in good creative agencies is that they act as a break, because you can imagine, I want the volcano to blow up and my hero and heroine to run through here carrying the product, and then somebody has to say, well, are we going to do this in CG? Do you need a real volcano? What's going on here? And that level of practicality in a creative agency to say, yes, we can do that, but it's going to cost this, and here are some other ideas that are actually achievable inside the budget and framework you're doing. And that means they have to understand all the elements of the creative process, from casting and art direction and everything else. So that bit of expertise being put between the client who wants the world and the practicality of getting it on the air for a deadline is an important thing that those people in creative agencies can help you with.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Bill nailed it. That's exactly the kind of relationship, at least that I have, with creative agencies. They're the idea people, and chances are I'm the guy that has to make it work. So you have to balance their expectations with what's going to fit in the budget and what you can actually do without it turning into a gigantic production.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of creative agencies, mostly as the production partner to make that work. And there's a saying that I've said here many times. It's just, amateurs talk about strategy and professionals talk about logistics. And in general, as a production company, you're the logistics person. So the agency is the strategy person. And so the thing, and they're not amateurs. They're very good at their strategy. They're very good at understanding market research. They're understanding how that works. They're not necessarily as good at understanding how to get it done or what it's going to cost or what the issues are going to be. But they come up with great ideas. here's the thing that I learned over time, because I used to look down on creative agencies a lot. like, oh my gosh, like I do not, like these guys are killing me, and they would do crazy things and want things that were impossible and everything else. But we got way better by working with them. And what's interesting is this is kind of the same thing. If you do your own thing, there's a lot of things you just won't do. You just don't go down this path because it's hard. Like, oh, that's gonna be a lot of work, and you just don't go down that path. Creative agencies work with clients who don't necessarily have a strong idea of what they want to do. They know that they need to do an event, but they don't, or they need to do a commercial. They don't really know what that commercial should be. Like, show me something that's cool, right? Creative agencies come up with ideas unencumbered by the circumstances. so the thing is that they come up with ideas that they're not thinking about, and this is very important. They're very creative because they don't have to think about how to get it done. They're just thinking about what would be cool and what would it look like, and then they pay people like us to get that done. Right. And then and oftentimes that we tell them, well, that's going to be this much money, or we have to get rid of these things, and then that becomes the thing, right, that they have to deal with. So we become the logistics person. But it actually is really important. I used to complain the fact that the creative agencies had no contact with reality over what they were doing. But I, over time, realized how important that was that they are able to think they don't have to think about how to get this done. They just have to think about what they want to do, and then it forces us to get better at what we do, and forces us to figure out, like, there are so many, that the one I always talk about, the flamethrower, that's some creative agency that thought that would be really cool. And we had to figure out how to make that work. And there was a lot of lifting and turning and everything else to make that work. So I think that I went from thinking that they were just a waste of time to, after working with lots of really great ones and being pushed to my edge. And the reason that I know what I know is because of creative agencies asking for something that was impossible before they asked for it, and then 3 weeks later we were doing it, and then 2 months later we did it all the time like it was nothing, and so I think that they play an incredibly important role in what we do, and I think it's very hard for production companies to do what creative agencies do because we're too caught up in how hard that would be. Go ahead, Sky.
So who is the keeper of the budget? Both the emotional of, that's way crazy, that's going to not reach our audience, and or
client. The client just decides where they're going to go find the money, because it all comes back down to action equals possibility is greater than circumstance. So if you create an event that the client wants, they'll find the money. Like most of the clients that if you have a creative agency, you have the money. You're just making a decision about whether to allocate it or not. So the thing is that there's money somewhere. Like if you're working with a Fortune 100 company, they have the money to do the crazy idea. They have to make a decision about whether they're going to allocate that money for that. The greater this possibility is, the less the circumstance of the money matters. And so the thing, and that's again what creative agencies are really good at. They have whole teams that just build slide decks, and they have people building 3D visualizations of those things. So they have a whole machine that's there to create possibility, and get folks to loosen up their wallets and spend more, 5 times more than what they planned to when they called them. Go ahead, Nigel.
Well,
go ahead, Sky. What were we going to say?
Well, I once had a marketing person say, "Oh, ready, fire, aim is his strategy." And I thought, no, that's crazy. Yes. And he says, no, we don't know what's going to stick. So we're going to throw everything out there. And from a logistics person, I was thinking, no, you need to have ready, fire, ready, aim, fire. And he's going, yeah, we don't know what's going to stick in some cases of marketing.
The big thing is that whole time, time, quality, money it's great for them to think of big things as long as we have enough runway and enough budget to do it. Because people, like an agency says, well, what can you do? Like, what would be possible? I'm like, anything's possible with enough time and money.
There you go.
I can shoot a film on the moon if you give me enough money. And so, and enough time. So anyway, go ahead, Nigel.
I just want to add 2 quick thoughts. One, I worked with a creative agency once. I had a particular thing I needed to communicate, and none of us could find a simple way to communicate it. And none of us are stupid. We just kept making it too complicated. So we hired a creative agency, not to create the advert, but just to help write a manifesto for us, effectively, about what we were doing. And getting with smart creative people changes everything about the way you see a problem. Yeah. Second thing on the budget I wanted to add was as a client, you sometimes, if you're inexperienced, don't know all the things you have to pay for. I run at one company $100 million worth of television advertising one year, and I did everything, budgeted it all right, except I forgot that we'd actually have to pay for them to make the adverts. So,
Right.
it sounds stupid, but, I'm giving them $100 million to run adverts. They go, no, that's just for the placements. It's still going to cost us $15 million to make the ads.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I bet you when you're having trouble describing it was for hula hoop, right? Round for kids. All right, next question.
Next one comes from David Paskin in Miami, Florida. And any thoughts on the newly announced Rodecaster Pro 2?
Guy.
Yeah, the original one, when it came out, I was like, great, this thing's nice and simple, easy to use. And then I recorded and I was like, it's kind of noisy. And so, yeah, a lot of people started getting cloud lifters, and with these dynamic mics, it just didn't have enough gain to get clean sound. So on this show, you would have never heard me recommend the original one. I really like the sound devices or some of the Zoom stuff, or there's a lot of other mixers that give you clean sound. This one makes it so you don't need a cloud lifter, and then they're claiming ultra low noise preamp. So I think those are the proof of this is in the pudding. They've made these colors so that you can identify which mic is which, super easy. The other thing is they bought Aphex, and so I know Mitchell uses an Aphex channel, and when I was doing some work with Tony Robbins in the rack there, somebody said that's the key to the operation right there, is that Aphex Aura Exciter. And so that's built into this thing for $699. So there's a lot of value there that it's a recorder. You get 4 headphone outs, because normally when you do something like this and you want all your guests to have headphones, that's another $200, $250. So overall, it's a great device for $699.
That's great. Mitchell?
Yeah, all that and more. It's an obvious improvement over the Mark I. The Mark II is better, which has just been announced. It's got faster processors in it. You can control it from 2 different computers, which is kind of cool. I like that idea. And yes, Mickey, it's got Aphex to the gills.
Go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you've said. I think that new screen is very nice. The only disappointment I have is that they should have made this version 32-bit float. It's still 24-bit, and come on, we're dealing with podcasters, some that have experience, some that do not. They could really use that 32-bit float for those times when things go awry.
Yeah, and for those listening to 32-bit float, it just has such a wide range. It still has a certain dynamic range. That's the dynamic range of the response. But if your volume's a little too high or a little too low, and you're recording a 32-bit float, you can just move it. There's so much data there that you can just simply move that up and down from what it actually recorded. And so it's a really powerful tool to give you a much larger landing pad, to land your show on. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Sabato in Albany, Oregon. He says, I have a 12-channel snake that runs from our gym to my office and or control room. Admin wants me to move offices about 50 feet further. How would you extend the snake? Is there a Euroblock pass-through that might work, or should I just use XLR?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I would stay away from Euroblock because they can pull out. The wires are kind of ginchy the way they plug in. I've never had an XLR connector spontaneously become disconnected. It's still the best locking audio system. So extended with XLR, don't use the Euroblock.
Yeah, I would take one of 2 methods. One would be to get another snake that's an XLR and just attach it, to that. It should be fine if it's okay right now, to what you're doing. The other option is to attach an Ethernet cable to one end of the snake that you currently have, and pull it through, and then switch over to either Alternet or Dante or something else, and stop having to worry about XLR running a long distance. 50 feet is longer than I run most XLR. So I mean, I know people can do it, but it's a noise attractor. Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, and my other question with noise attractor, is there also a resistance? Do you start losing signal? Do you need a repeater of some kind?
If you're running line balanced through XLR with star quad cable and Neutrik connectors, you can go pretty long. I will say that you can run hundreds of feet without it being problematic. I don't know how long the original run is, but you can run a long way with it, and your chances of noise are pretty low. The problem is that shaking out noise out of an audio channel, once it's there, is hard. Like it's, and that's why I try to avoid it like the plague. This can become like days of work, and it can be something that becomes new for a program. Someone parks a scissor lift or something else near your audio, and suddenly now you have to figure out what's happening, and you don't know where that scissor lift is. You don't know it's a scissor lift. You don't know. It's like it's a needle in a haystack of why you're getting buzz in the line, and so that's the thing that's why I try to run. I mean, for me, it's you want to try as best you can to run diverse runs with Ethernet on its own network to not have to do that. And the Ethernet's a lot cheaper. Next question.
I'm hoping I can get things right. Douglas Carmichael, many mainstream concerts sequence synth parts that, quote, can't be played live with sequencers designed for real-time interaction like the Squarp Hapex. Could you easily bridge the gap between sequencing and live play?
We see a lot of the sequencers being used I'm not sure exactly around the question, and I don't know about the app, but we see a lot of sequencers being used inside of a live event, and a lot of that has to do with they're being live activated or they're attached to time code. Go ahead, Victor.
Exactly, Alex. What I was going to say is that although a solution like you're describing here, and I just went to the website briefly, that does it. You don't need to do that as long as you can lock the time code and do a click. Somehow your sequences are going to be in time and they're going to be right. And that's what's been done since the 80s.
Yeah. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. Stream Day 22 was yesterday. A slate of YouTubes and a few people from here in the back end did a very interesting thing. Who watched and who participated on the back end?
Afraid I don't know anything about it. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I tuned into a little bit of it. It was kind of cool to watch them toss it from one influencer to the other. There was Aaron Parecki, Doug, who we've seen around, Doug Johnson, Photo Joseph, and then it was hosted by John from Here to Record, John Barker, Ryan, and David, the guy who wrote the companion buttons. So it was cool to see him toss from all around the world, 30-minute chunks. And there was a way in YouTube that they were playing at the end of, let's say, when John's first session to toss it to Photo Joseph, they were using something at the end of YouTube to actually put up a link to let you jump. And so it wasn't a continuous stream. It was a hop to hop to hop to hop all around the world. And so this graphic you kind of see at the beginning where they hopped from, the various parts of the world. But they did a great job. And this end of the day wrap up was done vMix in the cloud. This is Zoom Rooms. Jonas was on the back end along with Tucker. And it was a pretty polished show. It looked good, sounded good. I think they did well. Can't wait for next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Great work. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Up next, has anyone used Docker or some other containerized software for doing multiple Zoom rooms on the same metal?
Go ahead, John.
We've been using Oracle VirtualBox, and we'll run probably 4 virtual sessions and then Zoom on each one of those. And then we use Audio Hijack to route all the audio. So it's been working very, very well.
Chris?
Yeah, there's also, I'm putting it in the event chat right now. There's on a Mac, there's a terminal command that you can run that will open a second instance of Zoom on the same computer. And I haven't done it like in production or anything. I've done it to experiment where you can open up Zoom multiple times on one machine. And it's just a terminal trick you have to know how to do. But I put it in the event chat.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Samuel Nordvik of Norway. In what cases would one want to use true 30 frames per second instead of 2997 frames per second?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it depends on whether you're running drop or non-drop. It's not always a precise calculation. With other things, for example, some audio will be synced at a different speed, and audio you can really notice the problem when audio is recorded at 24, but you want 23.987, whatever the fraction is. It just divides in better.
Go ahead, Bill.
And just my typical warning whenever this comes up, remember in drop frame time code, frames are never dropped. Only the numbering system for frames gets dropped. You can't drop part of a frame. Just doesn't work that way. So drop frame is a process that keeps time code and clock time synchronized over long periods, unless you're using something that's going to be running over hours and hours and hours. There's no real reason to use drop frame.
So you lose about a frame every 50 seconds, if is the delta between the 2997 and 30. If it's the end product, if you're encoding it and it's embedded, you should be fine. If you record anything separately, so if you record your audio separately from your video, you're going to have trouble. The reason 2997, 5994, 2998, 2398 all exist is for audio. So in audio sync. So, and it's just because audio didn't update with video. And so the reality is that Facebook and YouTube and everyone else, they stream actually at 30 frames a second. So if you give it 2997, they're gonna convert it to 30 on the way out. So and 30 is fine. It's just that it causes so many problems with time code and audio that usually most of us keep our productions in 2997. And at the very end, if someone says we need 30, at the very end, we run it through something that turns it into 30. But we try to keep our entire production at 2997 or 5994, or what is it now? I have a new one. It was 119, like 8. So there's like the 120 has its own version of this as well. So these are so we try to keep it in those because it's gonna make everything work better with our time code and our audio. So I would be very careful of using it. If you're using it all on a computer or captures or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's really with professional video equipment that you want to be careful of not doing that. Next question.
Chris Widener is back again from Lafayette. Anyone have any experience with a client using descript.com? And he's got the link there.
I have not. I mean, we've looked at it, but we haven't. Basically, I thought the Descript. I'm now confused looking at the website because I thought it was really about using building the. I actually don't know. Go ahead, Chris.
So, Chris, I've never used it, but I know people that have that swear by it. Besides doing transcripts and stuff, I'm fairly certain that Descript is the one where if you let it listen to a person's voice long enough, you can type in words and it'll just say it in their voice. Like you can fix a friend of mine does a little demo where he goes, now watch, I'm going to fix your sentence. And he just types in a word. And, in a pinch, you're not going to do it in a DC, comic book movie at that level, but in a, bad corporate video, which I do a lot of, you'd get away with it just fine.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
I think the real power behind Descript, if I remember correctly, is that you import your video, it then transcribes it. You can edit the transcription and it will then edit your video for you, which is a little crazy.
Yeah. Because that's what I got confused by. They've expanded a lot since the last time I looked at their website. There's just a lot more that they do. I was like, well, they're a transcript, group, and they've taken that transcript and moved it. I should take a look at it. I mean, I think that I've been using for similar things. I've been using SimonSays.ai because it ties directly into Final Cut. So it's easy for me to have all of that stuff totally tied together. But Descript looks really good, and it looks like a really interesting product to take a look at. So we should definitely maybe we'll reach out to him. If someone reminds me, we'll reach out to him and see if we can't bring him on the show. Next question.
Alex Goldner, our friend in London, specifies this is not a second hour question, but it's about the WWDC, the Worldwide Developer Conference that we're about to talk about for the second hour. What do you hope Apple will announce during the State of the Union session? Good news for developers who make products and services for our industry. Not good news about Apple products and services in the keynote. What do you think?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I have a 2015 Mac Pro that I've had hot rodded by OWC, and it's sort of like a 5K run. We're getting right to the end of our ability to run, and I'm hoping desperately that the WWDC will include a new Mac Pro because I'm game.
And for folks who haven't watched both of these, the keynote would probably announce the Mac. State of the Union is really deep dive for the developers. So they really dig into this is all the libraries you're getting and this is all we're putting together. Go ahead, Nigel.
If it's a question of hope over expectation, I would like to hope that they will say, for the first time ever, you will be able to dual boot your M1 iPad into Mac OS.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, as far as libraries go, I mean, what I'm hoping to see is, of course, a deeper dive into AR, deeper dive into USDZ support. I mean, I think that's going to be really important for developers, and so giving them, those things. I think we're in the State of the Union. We'll probably see any kind of creature comforts that they're adding for developers as far as how they submit their stuff to. I mean, that's become a big deal with the App Store, which oddly enough, I've just never had trouble with. Like I work on teams that build apps for the App Store, and it takes time and there's a little back and forth, but it's not a big deal. But it seems to be a hot item for developers. So anyway, I think that those are things that I don't know if I have a lot of other things that I'm really driving from a developer's perspective. I think that giving developers greater access to some of the, kind of Apple only services related to security and so on and so forth would be pretty useful for some of us. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. I've been thinking about a secondary synth atop my Roland Phantom 06. I use a lot of atmospheric sounds, he notes. Would a Yamaha Mod X be a solid choice, or would my Arturia KeyStep Pro controller be better? The Mod X has no aftertouch and the KeyStep does.
Go ahead, Victor.
So I definitely would not recommend the MODX for atmospheric type sounds. It's a great keyboard, especially lightweight if you're going to take it on the road. What I would recommend is if you have the Arturia KeyStep already, then go ahead and buy the Arturia V Collection 9. It happens to be on sale right now, and it's got some of the best synthesizer emulations out there. Atmosphere until you die. You'll have years of playtime with the Arturia V9 collection.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next. New Hampshire law requires disclosure to ticket buyers if a concert contains recorded lead vocals. While I see the consumer protection angle, do you think laws of this type are incongruous with modern music production practices?
I don't think so. I think a lot of times on tour, they have moved somewhat away from having the lead vocalists, covered, but a lot of it is there. Like if the lead vocalist, needs it, usually there's a track that can be added really quickly into it. Oftentimes it also is behind them. So it's not that they're not singing, it's just that they're not singing all of it. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I just read a story the other day. It was hysterical. There was a young band that was up and coming, but it turned out that the lead singer's dad actually sang the lead parts. So in their concert tour, they had dad behind the stage. And the guy was up front lip syncing to them. So I can see why people, what are you going for? Are you going for the reputation of the band and to see your idols up on stage performing live? I can see that being a little bit of a bait and switch kind of thing. And I've actually seen that kind of thing also happen in big name concerts where there was somebody supposedly playing a guitar solo, and my angle was such off of in the side stage to see that there was actually a guy behind the scenes playing the guitar. It's just part of the music business, and you got to understand it.
Yeah, I think that this is part of what turns people off from watching a lot of different things, is this over packaging of it. Like, we're going to give you the perfect experience of something rather than a real experience. Like, one of the things that's interesting is that in computer graphics, we spend a lot of time beating things up. Like, everything is about adding imperfection back because the computer can do perfection really easily. Perfect surfaces and perfect edges and perfect. How do you add the imperfection that makes things real? And it's really something that I really spent, because I built whole collections of things to beat things up. And what I really got was how everybody around us, for instance, the imperfections are what make them real for us. If someone's perfect around you all the time, they're actually not that approachable. You don't actually, those aren't the people that feel real to you. It's the people who have those imperfections and the quirks and all the other things. You think you want them to get rid of those things, but that's what makes them real. That's what makes them real for you. That's what, creates that connection, is the imperfections, not the perfection. And so I think that when we see this a lot with TV, we have plenty of time and budget to make things perfect. We see a lot of those, those bits and pieces. And I think sometimes that's a draw why people use cameras that aren't perfect, lenses that aren't perfect, other things that aren't perfect, because it brings a reality, a realness back to to the experience. And so I think that this is something that a lot of music loses, in this process. I haven't been to a large concert. I haven't been to a stadium concert since the 90s. The last one I saw was U2 in Cal Palace in Southern California, and I was in a seat very far away, watching this kind of spectacle, and it was cold, and I thought to myself, "Why am I here? like, why am I doing this?" And I haven't been back since. I've seen, I think the most concerts I've seen is since we built this little stage in the last 20 years. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next, and this one's for John Preto specifically. John, how are you virtualizing multiple macOS instances with VirtualBox? Do you have to install macOS in each VM from a USB stick, or does it use the system recovery partition?
Go ahead, John.
No, we installed 4 instances of Mac OS. You can run Mac OS on a Windows box too with VirtualBox. It's great. So managing 4 VMs, it's a Hypervisor 2 instance Oracle VirtualBox. It's a great product.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, for an aspiring iOS developer, what app ideas would stand out from the crowd in one's portfolio and make one marketable?
I think that the most successful apps are usually something that a developer is, kind of scratching their own itch. There's something that bothers them that they don't have, and they're filling that gap with a product. I mean, I think that there are other people that build other products, but I think the ones that are really, like we saw with Audio Design Desk, that's a person who worked in a bunch of films, so, Gabe had worked in, film for a long time. He had seen the things that he likes. He was frustrated by what was missing, and then they started fixing that problem. And so I think that finding something that you really understand and that you solve, I think is often more, and then making it great, and figuring out how to make that great is the easiest way to stand out in those areas. Next question.
Oh, this one's going to be difficult. Peter Moore had one for Victor, but Victor just had to leave. He says, I sent Mickey a video of NOS new old stock stuff at a fave shop here in New Zealand. Turns out the Hughes and Kettner cab I bought was made in March of 2008. They have a lot of brass saxes and so forth. Are you interested? We just missed him.
We just missed him there. So anyway, you have to get that question in earlier, Peter. That's the only. You just have to. It's 6:30. 6:30 is a good time to ask those questions, or earlier. I will tell you that that this is just at the end of the hour because we've got a couple minutes. But the best time to ask is really before 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I think we reset at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that the day before. But really, at between 3 and 6 a.m. is a great time to add them at the latest. When I flip the system over, when I set it up and pass it over, one of the first things that I do before I get up and make breakfast and do other things that I do when I get ready is I look at all the questions that are posted and I try to think about them and I do a little research and I check on the links and I do, I kind of have this little process of kind of like trying to think through those questions. Then I go about the little things I do in the morning before we start the show while everyone else here is setting up. And but it lets me kind of think about the questions and try to think about things that I might want to say, or, I'm not going to answer anything on that question. Like, I don't know anything about that question. But I kind of make those decisions early on. And so it's, for those of you watching, if you're producers, one of the most powerful things there is to go ahead and ask those questions. If you get ahead and ask those questions early, your chances of getting more thoughtful answers is much higher. It doesn't mean that, again, once we're in the show, and especially if there's not enough questions there to get through the show, then please keep on asking them. But and a lot of them will answer. I think this panel answers the questions better than any other panel I've ever seen. So I think that there's a lot of thoughtful answers, but they're more thoughtful when you answer them a little bit earlier, when you get them in there, because it gives us time to think about them. So it gives, on Tuesdays especially, it gives Carl the opportunity to build more slides. Carl builds a lot of slides, and we're hopefully going to have more people working on that type of solution as well. All right, we're now jumping into the second hour. One of the things that we were talking about earlier was that we're going to start adding these gaps, and so there will be a point where we do everything we can to start and stop right at the top of the hour, but we're not quite there yet because I was vamping a little bit to keep things going. So we're having a second hour here. about WWDC. We have WWDC coming up. We're gonna cover it a lot. So there's gonna be a lot of WWDC. So we're gonna have NAMM, and then we're gonna have WW, and then we're gonna have Cinegear. So the next couple of weeks are gonna be relatively intense. What we're doing with WW right now, and people can have suggestions and things that they want to, that they think we should do, but I'll give you a sense of where we're going with it, is that Monday, we'll talk about what we want to see. There'll be a lot of like, what do we want to see and what's our wish list and how do we want it to look and so on and so forth. We're going to carry our coverage, instead of doing after hours, we're going to carry our coverage of WWDC or Monday through to, we're going to carry it into the keynote. So we'll do we'll actually watch the keynote together and we'll stream it out. Next week, I'll give you an update. I'm still trying to think through how we're going to do that, whether it's going to be a second ear experience or whether we just show the video. We want to be careful of, like, we're not going to definitely ever push the video full screen to the show because it will get flagged really quickly. And what we may do is what I've been thinking about right now, and people can put up suggestions, panelists or others. I'm thinking of putting the video in our gallery, not going full screen to it and not playing its audio. So you still have to play it somewhere else, but it tells you when we can talk about something. The problem that we have when we do second ear experience is that people are at different points in time. And no matter what I say, people will say something about something not all of us have seen yet. So what we want to do is have something like a sync point that will have one little window that's there that allows us to do that. So I think that's where I'm kind of going with it. I think that'll be fine as far as I don't think we're going to get in trouble with Apple's YouTube filters if we do that. So anyway, so we will. So that'll be through probably 11:30 in the morning. We may do a after hours coverage of. We're not going to do another office hours, but the State of the Union will probably jump in and watch together, or people can watch together. That evening, we're working on getting some folks up to the stage that we have up here, and to be able to do a little round table. And it might be a handful of people that are offsite, a handful of people that are inside, that are on premise. The problem is some of the influencers that we want to bring in are going to be in Cupertino. so they don't have anywhere to go as far as jumping in virtually. So we may have this kind of hybrid. It's a little bit of a hybrid, but not hybrid like there's an audience, but hybrid like there's some people on stage and some people that might be virtual. So kind of like a twit kind of thing where we do something. I don't think we'll put monitors up, but we'll take a look at that. So anyway, so that's what will happen. I can't promise this yet, but we are potentially bringing a band in. So at the end of the thing, we might have a band play for us, do a little concert for you. So we're working on that and see. Hopefully, we'll get the negotiations figured out in the next couple of days. We'll know by next week. And then, so that'll be Monday, and then right now we're looking at Tuesday. Well, so the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday second hours will be dedicated to just covering things that we saw. So we'll have developers we'll bring some developers in and talk about audio and video libraries and so on and so forth on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we'll talk about AR and 3D and anything else that's been added. And then Thursday is kind of a catch-all, that we're just going to, any other things that we saw that were coming up and so on and so forth. And so that's currently the plan, for those, for that activation. So it should be a pretty, complete discussion about those things during WW. So let us know what you think in the comments and questions and so on and so forth. But go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's so very important to provide that context for those of us that have never been to a WWDC. I have not been to one. And if I don't have the context of the commentary of the panelists, then it won't make as much sense to me. But I feel like I'm much more invested in the program than I've ever been because of the context of what we do every day here. So chances are there's a lot of other people that think the same way. We shouldn't assume that everybody knows about what's going on.
Yeah, and I think that it's going to be the same for NAMM and Cinegear, which is that it's the panel that's all sitting there watching and throwing in their 2 cents. I think adds an incredible amount of value over a standard coverage. So hopefully that'll make a difference there. Go ahead, Bill.
As someone who's done the second screen experience on the last couple of times we've done this, it's always been a little difficult for me because it seems like trying to launch the keynote on an iPad, listen to the sound from that along with the show and commentary. I often found myself literally missing topics that were going by because I had somehow managed to get my iPad feed delayed by half a minute or something like that. So to whatever extent, and I know this is a technical challenging thing for you, Alex, but to the extent we can get some reference as to what's happening in the panel or in some way that we could know when the show of office hours is at this point in the presentation, that will help. And I understand, particularly bringing audio and things like that has to be separate, but I just want to try to get this delay as close to that we're all on the same page as possible.
Yeah, the worst part is that I think that a lot of stuff's been alluded to for where things are going with Zoom and everything else. There's a lot of things that we think eventually will be possible that would make it really easy to do this that just aren't quite there yet.
Yeah.
It won't quite be on when we need it. So it's been like by, I don't know how much time, but it's something to, because once we, there's some stuff that we think that might be possible in the future, but this one we're going to have to kind of be, one thing that we could do is almost everybody has Unity. We could theoretically send down Unity. We could send the program, the keynote. So everyone's listening to it.
If the show feed could come down Unity, that would be fabulous. Because then at least that's in sync and we could be commenting on the same things and not have that discrepancy between audio and video, which kind of drives you nuts.
We would all be listening to exactly the same thing at the same time. That's critical.
Yeah, no, that might work because we can't broadcast that, but we could.
Right. Completely.
We could have it so that people are listening and we at least hear it at the same time. So that might be. And
then if our video and the panel view and the audio is delayed exactly the same, doesn't matter to us. We can still comment.
Right.
Beautifully, even if we're 10 seconds delayed from the broadcast.
And if you're commenting, you just put it in form of a statement so that you can make sure you got the right question or comment.
Yeah, you go, Chris. You have the.
Yeah, I was going to say, it might mean that although we, as a group, are in sync, we actually might be seeing it slightly out of sync from what we're hearing. Yeah,
we'll see it out of sync. Well, no, because what we'll do is the video that goes into our Zoom will be generating it might be slightly out of sync, but it won't be majorly out of sync. It won't be like seconds. It'll be like a second off, or half a second off or something like that. It'll be a minor out of sync, we won't be able to test sync with it, but I don't think it'll be that much because we're going to take the video, we'll put a video in a little window. That window, the video that goes into that window will also be getting pumped into Unity. So it should be very, very close.
Which also means that if we do have an iPad or something, we can just turn the sound off on it, and that'll give us a higher resolution visual representation. And even if that's delayed, for looking at slides and things like that, that would be the second monitor that we can have.
I think that we'll have it, if we're looking at it full screen somewhere else, that could be off. But I think that we'll know where we are in the system. And I think that the most important thing, by the way, is when you want to get in sync, you got to refresh your page. So that's the key with this is to refresh your page every once in a while. And all of us, if we all refresh our page about every 15 minutes, you're almost guaranteed to be within 6 seconds of each other. It's just a matter of when you pick up the next segment. So if you're refreshing the page, all of us will get the same segment. In most large streams, and I don't know exactly what Apple's segmentation is, but in most large streams, they're set up at anywhere from 4 to 10 second segments. They're larger than in smaller streams, you have every 2 second segments, which are the same length as your GOP. But the reason you make larger segments is it creates less paper. It creates literally digital paperwork for the large, the Akamai's and the AWS's and so on and so forth. And so they can actually get overloaded by just just annotating it, like not the content itself, but just annotating where the packets are can get too big if the segments are too small. So that's why it takes a little while to launch. That's why it takes a little, so we can get reliably within probably 6 to 8 seconds of each other if we just simply refresh our pages every once in a while. Go ahead, Chris.
I think my number one concern or focus about WWDC is what will eventually become of the bet we have about the Mac Mini. I have not forgotten. You said
I still feel like everybody says that the studio is just a tall Mac Mini.
Well, except it's not called a Mac Mini. So there's that. But we have till the end of the keynote or whatever you want to call it. But
I don't have it in front of me, so I can't show you. But I'm good. I'm good for it, Chris. I'm good for it. If I lose, I'll pay gracefully. That's all.
I thought he said he was going to eat.
I'm not going to ask for a recount, and I'm definitely not going to. I'm not going to. There's going to be no recount. There's going to be no riot. There's going to be no.
I heard you were going to eat the keyboard. That's all I heard.
Are hanging Chads possible in this?
Chadinators.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna. There won't be any of that, Chris. I'll just simply.
As will I. If there's a new Mac Mini.
All right, everybody, calm down.
Will I.
You heard it here first.
There we go.
There we go. Hashtag.
All right. Can somebody please find that interchange? It's from about 6 months ago.
I don't know if it. I don't even know if it exists.
No, I think it was. I think it was in the show. Or you've deleted it, is what you're saying. Wow. So all those times when Alex was missing meetings or, slipping in at the last minute, he was furiously going through the archive trying to find evidence.
Snip.
Exactly. All right, next question.
Alex 40 Golner in London, the UK says, is it possible to make an HTML page that plays the video we are talking about in sync with the video of us talking about it, with a single set of controls to start and stop both videos at the same time and separate volume controls for each?
The problem is that what we're watching, I'm
going to go with impossible. Absolutely
not impossible. It is the only way we would be able to do that effectively would be to violate terms of service of what Apple does, at the little bottom of the thing. So I think we'd probably avoid that. So there are other people that have tried and failed in that area. They're in the middle of So I think that I think it would be hard for us to play that out and keep it in sync. It can be done, but I would not try it with this one specifically because there's a bunch of things at the bottom of the page that says you can't do that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, and I'm going to get into the English versus American here. What would you think of having a Brave panelist set up a system with beta or beta versions of iOS, macOS released at WWDC and testing the new features, I guess, in real time firsthand?
I think it'd be great. I think that'd be great for Thursday too. For if those betas go out and people can, I don't know. If you're a developer and you download it, I think that you also have to be careful of terms of service as well. I don't know if you can show that. At first I was thinking, that'd be great, but no, it would not be great. It would be upsetting for lots of people. We want to cover it, but we want to kind of play with. We're gonna color it between the lines. On this, so we're not gonna we're gonna. So I think we probably stay out of that because as a developer, if you have a developer license and you do that, I think that would also be a violation of your terms of service, and we don't want to get people in trouble for doing something that is. We can talk about it. We can talk about the features. I think that showing the betas would be problematic. Next question.
J.J. McKenna in Santa Fe, California notes, there are YouTube reaction videos online. What guidelines do these videos use to prevent strikes?
Go ahead, Chris.
First of all, I wanted to say, I was just noticing, Alex, that your wardrobe looks like my wardrobe with the chroma pulled out.
Yes.
I've been watching a lot of reaction videos. I think they're very interesting. And I've thought a lot about the copyright issues. For example, literally just last night, I was watching a kid who claimed he had never seen the last rap battles from 8 Mile, and he was reacting to them. Half of it was staged. But I can remember the first time I found those rap battles on YouTube, they did the trick where they reversed the video and then they zoomed in on it, and then they basically futzed with it so that there was no AI that could say, oh, I recognize this as the movie. And nowadays you can find actually really good copies of it. But this guy had it 2/3 of his screen and then he was just onto the side. and he was playing the audio full quality, and I don't know why some of that stuff doesn't get striked. Now maybe it does get striked and just can't be monetized. Is that is that what's going on?
Well, so I think that there's different levels of it. So, and I don't really know what Apple's policies are on it, but I will say that for other companies that are doing these, there is a when they're doing the live version, if you rebroadcast it, you get a strike. like there is we're going to turn your video off if you're just playing it out. It's during the live that there's a lot of sensitivity among many corporations to, they have their story that they want to tell. They're not interested in other people telling other stories right now. You need you to not show that. So they'll do a takedown on it. I mean, they'll literally strike it. When you take it later, that's kind of part of the press and what people do and break it down. And sometimes it may be a do not monetize. Sometimes it's track only. They're fine with you doing it, and they're just going to track the information. So there's do nothing in YouTube. There is track only, which means that you can still monetize it. They just want to know, they're going to get a report of where their video is showing up all over the world and how many people viewed it and everything else. It's a beautiful little graph that YouTube makes for that. And then there is the demonetize, which is that video can't make any money. So if you put it in there, and for YouTubers, influencers that are making money on every video, they avoid those. For people who don't care, then they don't care about those. And then there's the strikes. And so it just depends on, but I think that usually the live is going to get a strike, whereas the reaction videos later will not. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, that's the pattern I've seen is that reaction videos come out, people start using clips that are too long. All of a sudden, you see those same reactors chopping up or going back often, sometimes annoyingly often, to interrupt the full stream of things. And I just think that, it happens, it gets popular. Somebody makes a big to-do about it, probably demonetizes and slaps everybody on the hands. It goes away for a while, but then it always seems to come back, and you can't monitor, even the bots can't monitor, I think, everything. So it's just a difficult thing. I don't think there's a simple way to say, if you do this, you will be fine, and if you do that, you will get in trouble, because I think that shifts probably weekly or monthly.
The bots actually can pay attention to everything.
If
they're not reacting,
interpret the bot stuff.
If they're not reacting, it means that they chose not to. I've been amazed that YouTube can see, the great YouTube eye can see a hash in a video in just 20 seconds. I
guess what I really mean is that the algorithm behind that, they probably noticed that these 3 chunks of it, but did they give you 3 chunks or 5 chunks before they send out the automated notice? That is all over the place.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
You do realize we're here talking about how to beat the system.
No, we're not. We're talking about how to draw on the lines. like we're right. I think we're talking about not how to beat the system, but how to how to follow the rules as they're written.
But legally, we cover ourselves by intent. Our intent is not to monetize or subvert it.
Yeah, there's legal, and then there's practical. And the practical is that if we're doing a live stream and it gets turned off, it doesn't matter whether it was legal or not. All that matters is no one can see what we're talking about anymore. So so that's kind of the process there.
And at least here in America, fair use does allow for criticism of other work, so you can talk about it a little bit. And
if we had it in a small window and we were talking over it, it's just that it's not worth the trouble. Like we can do this without that. We can be creative. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Again, could it be brought up to the panelists in gallery view, but not shown to the program out using a virtual machine sending the feed?
Yeah, so I think that we can put it in this panelist view. There's a lot of things that you can't see as a viewer right now. So I think we can put it in the panelist view and then just have it not show up for everybody else, and then we see it as we're going through it, and then we expect the viewers to be watching it on another screen. So I think that we can do that. Yeah. Next question.
Next one comes from Danny Law in Malaysia here on the back end, wondering if turning on closed captions would be one way to sync us all without audio.
I think we could do that. I would still want to listen to it. Like, I don't know if I'd want the captions. I don't think the captions would help me because I'd be looking down all the time rather than reading the slides. So I think that we'd probably not do that for this one, at least. Next question.
Alex Golner back again. With most people experience office hours coverage on WWDC won't be watching live. Is it possible to make a post-event HTML dual player with office hours YouTube video in one player in sync with Apple's YouTube video in the other with curated Mukana comments synced?
Go ahead, Chris.
That would be dope. Like if there was a way,
Right.
kind of like what's his name? Was it Gabe yesterday with the audio desk thing, where the two timelines chase each other? That would be really cool. Like you go to either window,
Or you put them both in the same window. You do, and then you set them up for autoplay. So you just, when you go to that page, it just puts both of the windows and starts them up. Let's experiment with that. Let's
Should
talk
be
about
easy
it.
in post, wouldn't it be? Just to take the two feeds and
No, you
sync
can't
them
do it in
up?
post. You need to. We don't want to grab somebody else's content. So it would be 2 pages that did that, but it would also mean that whatever version of it we use would need to be, the flag for embedding would have to be turned on, which I don't know if that would be the case.
that would be really neat though.
I just don't want to build. I think it'd be neat, and I think that we just have to make sure. I think we test it and do some stuff. I can't promise it. It could be something we can play with. The main thing is that with all the coverage that we're doing with these, we want to try to stay within the lines as best we can, because we want to build it into a pattern of doing stuff. Mitchell.
Aren't we in not getting ourselves a little out of hot water if we put indicias on there and we disclaim it correctly? So we're not
really.
assuming any ownership of the content we're showing.
No, I don't. Again, we're not trying to get away with anything. We're just trying to figure out a way to do it well. So let's think about that. Let's think about the dual player. Let me see what I can work on that. Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, could Commenda be a useful tool to dust off for WWDC?
For the uninitiated, Commenda is the sister app to Mukana, and Commenda basically will go and grab all the comments out of a social network, or all of them at the same time. So you can, Commenda we use to, like, if you have let's say you have an event and you have it on 2 different channels on Facebook and 1 channel on YouTube and 1 channel on Twitter. And so Commenda will just grab all those comments and drag them in. It'll just go, I'm going to grab all the comments from all these events and bring them into one unified system so that we can manage them for Q&A. And I probably won't do that because I have grown, I think because of Mukana, I've grown so impatient with the comment systems in social networks that I just don't want to interact with them anymore. I'd rather just turn them all off, or just ignore them. They're so rudimentary that I just don't want to deal with them anymore. Next question.
Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand, back. He says, have you considered getting some YouTubers like John Prosser and Sam Cole on the WWDC panel for, a crossover event that would get viewers from the Genius Bar and also their own YouTube channels?
We are talking to some influencers. I haven't talked to them, but I will take a look at them. I think I've worked with John before. Sam Cole I haven't worked with, but we should take a look at it. We are talking to some YouTubers though about being on, so we'll know those things in the next couple days. Next question.
Dennis Champion Walker, Mansfield in the UK. What role could graphics play in the show? Could screenshots of the slides Apple is showing be usable? The media often shows these.
Yeah, I think we can definitely grab screenshots or grab press images and so on and so forth for that. I'll see what we can do as far as getting access to press images. And by the way, for the audience, this will be a shorter show than normal if you don't ask more questions or have more suggestions. So we're down to our last couple. I think that not for necessarily the first day, but I think that for the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I think getting lots of screen captures and thinking about the things we want to cover. In fact, I think that we're probably going to want to think about some little bit of a run of show. We're going to talk about these things and these things and these things, and we'll let our special guests know that that's happening. So stay tuned for that. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, is up next. Chris says, has anyone tried using a searchlight as a gobo with a QR code? Is it too low res?
I don't know if that was a WWDC. Oh, it was a first hour question, but
got left over.
I don't haven't done that. So I don't know. Next question.
I'm just fascinated by that. Is he talking about actually putting a QR code up on the clouds?
Yeah, I don't know.
With a searchlight? That's kind of weird and interesting. Douglas Carmichael, what would you think of short, ruthless review videos of the Apple Design Award-winning apps so that consumers and aspiring developers can learn what to look for in an app?
Well, I think that they're kind of doing that. If they're winning the design awards, they probably went through a lot of ruthless reviews. But I think, but looking at them, I guess, opening up the apps and talking about what we like about them, I think could be a really cool thing to do. As far as like, these are the design awards. The design awards happen after, for those listening, happen after the main one there. And so I think that could be an interesting, definitely something interesting for us to look at, like what makes this app great. Maybe we even try to get some of those design award winners, on the show, talk a little bit about what they did and how they approached it. So that might even be something that follows up, not necessarily in the week of Dub, but we do something more ongoing. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't those design awards get awarded at WWDC? So we wouldn't know in advance what apps are going to win the awards, or do they publish a list beforehand?
No, I don't think they do. But again, we could be opportunistic as far as how that goes.
Yeah, I can see Post elevating them if they were the best.
Right. Yeah, and I think that overall when we look at it, I think that it is a. I mean, obviously, we're probably a little bit more Mac leaning than most online groups, just because of the nature of how a lot of people found out about the show. So I think that I think it's worth us spending a lot of time kind of digging into those things. Also, I think that there's a lot of industry trends that I think are going to be really important for us as we look at where, Apple's going. I think that the AR thing is really important for us. I think that where they're going with audio and video and acceleration and any kind of hardware, I think is going to be important. So I do think that those are things that we want to, pay, I think it's worth us paying a lot of attention to, what Apple's releasing here. For many of us, I think it's kind of a core piece there. Well, this one, I don't have a lot of other things to talk about there. I know Ken is whittling away at the, getting ready for the web page. You'll see some new web pages pop up. On the site to support that and let you know what's going on. We're kind of figuring a bunch of those pieces out right now, those final pieces, and so we're getting pretty close. I've got one more question here.
Yeah, well, another question popped in from Douglas Carmichael. I've been learning how to design the user interfaces with Swift UI in Code with Chris. How does one elevate their skills to create truly exceptional versus simply utilitarian user interfaces?
There are so many videos about user interface design on WWDC. So every year, if you do a search for the human interface or interface design or whatever inside of the last 5 years of WW, they'll talk a lot about what makes things click well and what works and what doesn't work and so on and so forth. So definitely take a look at those things as far as design. And I think that it's one of the things that really sets a lot of Apple products that do well, aside from everybody else, is that it's not just utilitarian, that there's a little bit of a, it just is very smooth, like it just does what it's supposed to do. It works just the way you expect it to work. It thinks a little ahead. I think that those are things that are really important as far as UI design. Next question.
Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand. Just my mind thinking out loud here. Could the WWDC coverage have a video board of all the coverage, Twit, Engadget, Bloomberg, Mr. Gurman, etc., as part of a different coverage of WWDC?
Yeah, I think that's what, well, we're not going to do that. Everybody, it'll be a cacophony if we try to do like what everybody's talking about related to it. I think that we're going to be fairly myopic in the sense that we just care about what we think of it. so of how we look at that. So I think that it'll be a little bit more, a little bit more specific there. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just saying, this is kind of an aggregation idea, and the audio would be a nightmare first and foremost. But I can see maybe if you're interested in following one of those other broadcasts at the same time you participate in this and see something and can timestamp it or something like that, you could bring it up as a comment. This guy said over here, or this woman said over here, and had a good comment about that people could then, in the post process, look at and discuss, especially if you captured it or something like that. But live, looking at all of them, I can't imagine being able to separate 5 audio feeds and do anything other than just get totally confused.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we already have a whole panel talking about something that I think that would be a, I think it's already a cacophony to some degree. So it'd be just making it more complicated. Next question.
Mitchell Hill, Wilmington, Delaware, says, what about WWDC prognostications leading up to the meet?
That's Monday morning. So we'll be talking about the Monday morning of the event, before the keynote. We'll talk about what we think is going to happen there.
And it doesn't include the wagering, right?
Well, if the wager will already be, it'll be done at 10 o'clock. The wager is done at 10 o'clock on Monday. So if there's no Mac Mini announced before 10 o'clock Monday, then I owe Mr. Fenwick $100. Next question. Oh, Bill, go ahead. You were going to say.
Well, I was just going to note that prognostications, one of the things about them, people love making them and they love reading them. Very few times do we go back and check on whether somebody's prognostication.
One thing that has
ratio.
been pointed out. One thing has been pointed out is what people will remember is if you said it and it happens, people remember it. If you're wrong, no one remembers. It just disappears into the ether. So you're much better. You're generally better off just making big don't procrastinate, but prognostications. You're better off throwing lots of long bombs and that are you're just sure of them, because you can always go back to you being sure of them, because no one ever reminds you of the ones you got wrong. Next question.
I'm pretty sure they're going to announce something surprising.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
my prognostication.
Yes.
Okay, Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. What if instead of doing the WWDC, we do a private stream that only comes up in Mukana? Would that still violate Apple's terms of service?
Well, we've watched these in after hours in the past. So, I mean, that is it. We're experimenting with the idea of covering an event and doing it more to the public than we have in the past. So that's a new experimentation for how we're doing it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael comes right back again with Alex. You mentioned augmenting the Code with Chris 90-day plan with WWDC videos about new technologies. What specific technologies would you recommend I focus on to make myself more relevant and therefore more hireable?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I'm going to let somebody else answer the specifics for you, Douglas. But to Bill's prognostication, whatever Apple announces, it will be the best ever.
Well,
the best one they've ever done.
Well, isn't that every time they come out, it's the best thing? It's like, so the last piece of thing wasn't something the best ever?
It's the best. Yeah, it's the best.
Always
iPhone
the best ever.
The best ever. Yeah, I always think that I'm just waiting for them to come out and just go, well, it's pretty good. We were really happy with some of the features from last year, but there's COVID and we've got some supply chain issues. And so we've decided to we're going back to stereo. I know that we're really excited about surround, but we just think we're going to pull back a little bit.
Quadraphonic sounds like a thing that could come back, like bell bottoms.
Exactly. Mono's the future. Mono's the new surround. So it's so down the center that it feels like it's all around
best ever.
You. Yeah, exactly. To be more specific, given your interest in Douglas in audio, the thing that I would really look at is the audiokitpro.com. These are a bunch of libraries that make it easier to build audio type applications. And the thing to be most hireable is to build applications. That's the fastest way to get noticed is to do something and to get people's feedback and to react to it. In my opinion. Next question.
Next one comes from Peter Moore again in Auckland, New Zealand. There's no Zoom app on Apple TV. I'm going to write something for me, but open for suggestions. And WWDC, for what I've seen in my Apple developer AC, is well and very interesting.
Yeah, I think that. I think that we'll just be watching on YouTube, so you won't need Zoom. Next question.
Mitchell Hill says, should we install an applause light for the event coverage? Mitch, you already have on air behind you. Just change out your mask in front of it and they can turn that into applause.
Yeah, I'm working on something there. So
Be cool. I mean, we have a meter, an applause meter, and we respond to whatever the announcement is.
Yeah, we could.
That's where I wanted to use that software that was introduced the other day, because I remember watching a clapper and an applause person come in to treat productions, and I'm thinking, oh, this could be fun. We could do that.
Are you thinking of canned applause, Guy?
No, of course. Well, maybe.
All right.
Everything in television is real, right, Mitchell?
So we'll give you think about it between now and next week. We're going to give you we're going to talk about what the final plans are as we go into the following one. And we'll have it all kind of nailed down for you next Thursday. And thank you so much from the producers for asking all the great questions. Thanks to the panelists. I can't do it without you. And now we're going to jump off and thanks to the folks in the back end doing all the great work. Can't do that without you either. So thanks so much. And we're going to jump into After Hours. Maybe. There it is.
So much jumping.
Mitchell.
Howard Thompson, tennis champion.
Oh, George.
Has been Kirsten. Gudrun was helping in the background.
Someday I'm going to have
Douglas.
some kind of a spritz and plots right here. I'm going to go.
Alex Purdy's name was in there. So many good names.